we have been told that if we just try harder, if we just eat better, if we exercise more, if we push through, then we will eventually feel okay. But if you're exhausted and it's not because you're lazy, it might be because life hasn't slowed down enough for you to recover. So if this sounds like you, this season of the podcast is for you. Because what you need might not be more discipline, but it might just be more support. So welcome to the Human Condition Podcast. If this is your first time or you need a reminder, my name is Kiri Jones. I am a certified personal trainer through the American Council on Exercise, and hopefully in 2026, fingers crossed, a national board certified health and wellness coach. My business, the Human Conditioned LLC, exists so that I can help people make sustainable behavior changes for their holistic health and wellness based in science and not necessarily on what is popular or trending, because what is popular and trending, even if it is based in science, might not be the right tool for you. Think someone hands you a saw to nail in a nail to a board. This is season 2 of the podcast. The first podcast I let run for a couple of episodes, but it's a new year. We're moving in a direction. This direction feels like the correct direction. I feel like I'm making the right choices. So we decided, we as in me, because I am the sole person in this company, to make season 2 of the podcast. But anyway, I have my show notes here, so let's get into the topics of today's podcast. I used to be embarrassed about having my show notes in my hands because I thought, like, most people just talk normally, but also this is my podcast. We live in a time, right, where we have the most access at our fingertips to things like fitness professionals, exercise information, nutrition advice, health and wellness professionals, health and wellness advice, self-care tips, whatever the case is. We have so much access to this information, and yet we are at a time when we are the sickest that we have ever been. And I'm pretty sure that I said that before in the previous season of this podcast. I don't remember why or what episode, but the fact of the matter is, it is the truth. We have soaring rates of chronic lifestyle-related illnesses such as obesity and type 2 diabetes and chronic heart disease, and you name it, it's out there. There are a lot of diseases that can be mitigated or combated by improving one's overall health and wellness. And then on top of that, we are existing in a time where the prevailing thought process is if you just try hard enough, then it will be successful. And I'm talking strictly in like the health and wellness sense. But people are exhausted. People are tired. And it's not because they're lazy. And it's not because they're not trying hard enough. It's like the advice just keeps assuming that people have unlimited time and unlimited money, and that it's just so easy to work around things like having kids and responsibilities. And maybe you're working 2 jobs instead of 1 job, or maybe you're living paycheck to paycheck. But whatever the case is, most of the advice is not adaptable to everyday life. And that can make people feel so guilty, myself included. And I do this to myself. It's like a duality when it comes to me, is because I know what fact is. I know what the information is. I know what reality is for me. I know that all of the stuff that exists out there is not applicable to me. And yet I still make myself feel guilty sometimes when I look at how other people are handling and managing their lives and have their like dream jobs and the nice houses and the cars or whatever. And I'm thinking, like, what is it that I'm doing wrong? And then I catch myself, because that's the thing. That's the guilt. That's the envy. That's the comparison that comes out in so many things. It's not fair. It's not fair for people to assume that it's that easy for everybody, but it's also not fair for us to have that language inside of our heads where we get to have self-deprecating language when it comes to just doing our very best. And I don't know, I always like to tell people, like, you've survived every day of your life up until this point. Like, you've survived, you made it. And you did so the best way that you knew how at the time. You made it through the hard time. If you're still in the hard time, you're doing all of the things that you think are the right answer. And whether they are or they aren't compared to other people, they're the right answer for you. So stop making yourself feel guilty when it comes to, maybe ignoring or skirting certain health and wellness principles. But like, if you want to change, if a change is needed and you feel like it's needed, then now, in quotes, now is as good a time as any. Whenever you're listening to this, now is the time. So it's not a motivation problem. It's a cognitive load problem. And I'm talking both from the amount of access to information that we have and also from our day-to-day lives. We were never meant to, as human beings, have the access to other people and these stories and the problems that exist across everything. We were never meant to have this level of access to everything. It was beneficial to start. Having access to all this information was a net positive for societies. But we're starting to see the fallout from that. And so there is just too much happening. Too much happening. But the reason that this is season 2 is it's not because we're rebranding or anything. I've already spent like some time trying to rebrand, but I'm like shifting my focus here a little bit. Season 1 explored so many aspects of health. We covered things like basic fitness information, nutrition, behavior. We talked about oxidative stress and mitochondrial health. Like we talked about so many things. I even had my first guest, which was my mom. Still to this day is my most popular episode. Over time, it became impossible for me to ignore this like simple idea. And it is that stress and sleep and the inability to recover properly as human beings is undermining everything else. I've watched people blame themselves way too much for the failures of the health and wellness industry or health education or healthcare in general to educate people on these topics. And it is not a failure on you. And I am not so naive to think that when it comes to certain people that exist in the world, that it might not also be a failure on them because you can't make everybody care. But I think the overwhelming amount of people do care. I just don't think that they know how to implement everything that's out there. It's a psychological and a systemic failure on people, not people's failure on the system. And so we really need to change. We need to change the dialogue. We need to make sure that we are in this for the right reasons and that we are communicating to any and everybody that is out there. I want to reiterate that I'm not moving away from health coaching principles like nutrition or fitness or other things like that. I'm trying to reposition a little bit in a way that I think that would be something that society could mirror. If society worked on cognitive load problems, on stress problems, on teaching people about sleep and the importance of sleep, and on stress and coping with stress and recovery systems, I think that it would open the door to having deeper conversations about other things like nutrition and diet. But I couldn't keep talking about the science. I couldn't keep talking about habits and behavior change and like discipline when the conditions weren't right for people to build those habits in. It's not the same thing for everybody. But if I were suddenly a thought leader in this whole thing and people looked to me for advice, I would tell society and healthcare as a whole, merge health and wellness together with healthcare and then start with sleep, recovery, and stress. So again, like I said, the real problem isn't motivation, and it should never be motivation. Motivation is fleeting. It doesn't always exist. It's not always there. It's usually there in times of like when an idea is exciting or when the prospect of reaching a goal is exciting. There's motivation there, but the motivation doesn't stick around long enough for you to reach that goal usually. the fitness culture really glorifies suffering. And I never thought about it until I heard it mentioned on a pretty prominent podcast that like people were having these insane opinions on things like steroid use or using GLP-1s for weight loss because they thought it wasn't fair that the person who was using them wasn't suffering enough to reach the goals that they were shooting for. And it was a little eye-opening because I had thought the same thing about GLP-1s at first. Like people, it was being overprescribed to people for weight loss, and I thought like this is insane. Like people aren't even trying. And then I realized suffering is not what allows people to reach their goals. And so it has been built into the fitness culture that you must suffer, you must grind, you must be disciplined, you must be motivated to get to where you want. Otherwise, you didn't deserve it. And that is insane. It's like sleep and active recovery are treated as these like optional things. And stress in this case is either normalized or it is not spoken about enough. Burnout, which is so common across societies that value the grind culture over human health, burnout is reframed as kind of this weakness thing. And I really think it's pretty similar to if you were to think, or if you've been in the military circles or know anybody that's been in the military circles, it's the same reason that people don't reach out for help when they need it is because there's this invisible expectation that like what is going on with you is wrong. And so when people feel burned out, they feel the need to push through things. The fact of the reality is we are living in a time that is causing chronic stress issues. And you might not feel like you're stressed out, but what I'm saying, stress equals load on your system. This could be, the amount of audio input that is coming in. Do you live near high traffic areas? Do you have kids? Are they crying all the time? Do you sometimes have financial concerns? Does your boss like breathe down your neck? Anything that contributes to a cognitive load in a non-positive way equates to stress. There's also the physical reaction to stress, whereas your body could be facing things like chronic inflammation from some unknown thing that is happening in your body. The problem is when it comes to the healthcare system, you're looking for acute symptoms that can be treated. When we're talking holistic health and wellness, we are looking at the whole system. If you live the whole system in a way that is beneficial for all system health, then we won't have to look so hard because hopefully eventually that system, whichever one it is, will correct itself. On top of that, like we have the chronic loop of stress and sleep, or just the chronic loop of sleep deprivation or chronically underslept. Sleep has an impact across every physiological system in the body. I don't think that they have found a system in the body that sleep doesn't have an impact on. We're talking hunger, hormones, mood, recovery, focus, resilience, like your ability to cope with stress, how your body repairs itself after exercise, how your brain stays healthy in order to stave off things like dementia and Alzheimer's. Sleep is so important, and sleep and stress kind of go hand in hand because sleep is your body's natural reset button and stress is a normal thing that your body goes through, but because we're living in a time where there is too much expected of us, there is too much of a cognitive load on us at all times that when it comes to like our nervous system, and I'll give like a really brief explanation that I might have given in a podcast before, but it's fine because this might be your first episode, so I don't want to assume. So anyway, we have what's called the autonomic nervous system, and this functions as parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest. This is the stuff that happens automatically. And then your sympathetic nervous system is a system that helps you with fight flight responses. It helps in emergent situations. It helps you be able to move faster or react faster or whatever your body decides it's going to do to react to a stressor. That's what it does. And so we have, because of all of the cognitive load coming in, because of the amount of stress that's coming in at all times, and the potential for bodily systems to be stressed and us not know it, we have shifted into this more sympathetic nervous system response to everything when it should be more like a teeter-totter. We're constantly trying to find balance. Like, it's based on input from all of your systems to figure out what we need to be more of at any given time. With the excess cognitive load, we are in more sympathetic. We are more stressed all the time. And in most cases, we don't even realize it. Now, that's not me saying that every single person in the world is stressed out. They just don't know it. I'm saying far and wide, stress, chronic stress, is an epidemic. It's a silent epidemic because most people don't know about it. Most people don't recognize certain things as being stressors. And I don't think it's talked about enough. So, like, you can't willpower your way through things like chronic stress and chronic sleep deprivation. Your mind was never meant to do that. You were never meant to push through these heavy cognitive loads, these heavy stress loads, nor were you meant to try to push through when you're not sleeping. And I have said this before in the podcast and any other thing. A common myth for people is that, oh, I only need 5 hours of sleep. I only need 6 hours of sleep. When the truth is less than 1% of the population are what is deemed short sleepers. And odds are that's not you. It's possible it could be you, but maybe you should try working on your health. Maybe you should try working on your sleep before you actually determine whether or not you are an actual short sleeper. When it comes to issues that you're facing, most people don't need somebody to be motivational. Most people don't need somebody to hold them accountable and be more disciplined. Most people just need support and education. I thought about this a lot leading up to the end of the year. And so what that led me to do was get what's called a sleep and recovery coach certification. I am now certified as a sleep and recovery coach. I've completed the course. I studied everything that was in there, and it really, really goes well with one of my favorite books that I would recommend to people for health and wellness. And that's Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. The ideas are similar. In fact, it was mentioned several times within that workshop. And so I think this is the right course to support what people are feeling and maybe not necessarily actually recognizing in themselves. It also supports my long-term goals for the business, and it supports my whole human health aspect. It wasn't meant to be like, I'm not trying to find like an easier thing to do. I'm not trying to find an easier niche for my coaching. I just want to be able to help the whole human. So yeah, I'm still very much in the foundation building of my business. When it comes to things like health and wellness, it's like you can have the institutional knowledge to get your certifications to begin with, but beyond that, it's all you. It's all your continuing education. It is all your passions and what drives you as a coach. And what really is important to me is making sure that we are addressing people in every aspect that we can. I don't want to get sucked into the diet culture. I don't want to get sucked into like culty exercise groups. I don't want to ignore the fact that our society is exhausted. And it's not fair to do that for so many reasons that we'll likely get into over the course of the year. But when it comes to the business, so let's get back to the business for a little bit. Because if you're following along to watch my business grow, like this is something that's key to hear, especially if you're not local to me, because you obviously can't see what I'm doing locally. But I'm going to be focusing on groups of people this year. I don't mean like group fitness sessions. I mean like workshops. Like I want to sit down with people who are caregivers, who are in some type of group that like maybe is ignored. Like I had this idea to reach out and contact groups, theater groups, people who perform regularly are very like underthanked. Like you got to think they're doing their normal lives, their normal full-time jobs or whatever the case is, and also having like long runs of rehearsals and things like that. So they're usually underserved. I want to reach out to groups like that. Like people who are running health department programs like substance use, those types of program leaders who often get left behind, and they are often the first to experience things like burnout. I want to talk to parents. I want to talk to people in the service industry, anybody who could be holding physical, emotional, or relational labor. Really what that boils down to is everyday people in group settings, because you feel like you can cover a lot that way. These people are expected to just give and give and give, and it is such a thankless job. They're just giving endlessly, and that contributes a lot to stress and burnout. And it needs to be recognized more often. People need to be publicly recognized for the things that they do for society. But B, it's also not good for your health. Burnout in a lot of cases is invisible. It's not something that you can see coming until you're there, and even then you have to recognize that you're there when you could have already been there for months, if not years. Traditional health and fitness advice that you find on the internet across social media, it doesn't fit every single person's life. And I will admit that it's getting better. I'm seeing more and more people addressing more and more demographics of people, and then also trying to be understanding of other people. But I'm also seeing certain areas of the health and wellness industry get worse. And I don't even know if it's because people are rage baiting. I don't know what it is. I saw a video where some girl was like just being rude about people not caring enough about their bodies and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to have to look it up. Maybe I'll do a reaction video if I can find it, if it didn't get taken down already, because most of the time when people put up content like that, assuming it's going to reach their audience, it reaches all the wrong people and forces them to take it down. But I'm interested in working with the people that their whole career, their whole job, their whole existence is to like hold it together. You're holding it together on stage to perform for somebody. You're holding it together for the person that is in your gurney being transported to the hospital. You're holding it together for a parent who is crying because their house burned down, or you're dealing with people who have repeatedly relapsed. Like, it's just, life is so hard, and I wish that we recognize these things beyond just saying that people exist in the spaces to help others. The people who are doing the helping, the people who are doing the performing, they need help too. And so I'm going to focus on that a little bit more heavily this year than one-on-one coaching. It's not to say that I'm not going to do one-on-one coaching. I just plan on doing focusing. I plan on focusing more on groups of people. I want to help as many people as possible. And maybe it's people don't need another one-on-one coach, and it might be in this setting where people can relate to each other in front of somebody else who is helping educate them on these things. But I'm going to start trying to do this with like workshops. And what I'm going to focus on this year, like I said, even though the podcast, the business is going to focus on this year, is stress, recovery, and sleep. This is foundational. It's foundational, and it has to be. I would be a hypocrite to say that it's foundational and then completely ignore it when it came to producing content. And so I'm no longer going to ignore it anymore, and this is going to be the focus. I'm going to try to do things in such a way that doesn't involve me being salesy or selling. It's just not who I am, and it's not the type of person that I'm trying to be. And so maybe if that means I have to do more workshops than I do one-on-one coaching, then that's the case. But either way, like, some people do better in one-on-one environments, and so I'm not taking that away at all. What this season is going to cover, season 2 of the Human Condition podcast, is we're not talking about hustle culture. We're not talking about biohacking obsessions. And I do think that there's a difference. There's a difference between biohacking, which is in and of itself is really just like finding the way to optimize your health by any means. I've seen people take like nicotine tablets who have never smoked a day in their life for the sake of biohacking. But there's a point in which it becomes an obsession, and now you're getting into that like cultish behavior again. But when I'm talking about biohacking, I'm talking about experimenting with your health, going to bed early and waking up at the same time every day, changing the foods that you're eating and seeing how it makes you feel. That's the type of biohacking I'm talking about. I also want to ignore and get away from toxic positivity, because toxic positivity is what's ignoring the very real problems for other people and what's causing these people to feel shame and failure when they shouldn't be. Not everybody, it's not real. Toxic positivity is not, being overly positive that much of the time is not real. And it's also like kind of gross. Like I feel like it's a little cringy to do that. But the other thing I'm going to do is not give you like simple things. I'm not just going to be like, well, just wake up earlier and then you can get everything done. Or if you didn't try hard enough, like that's on you. Because that's, I'm not going to give like simple things. I want to help explain the why. I want to have an honest conversation about stress and recovery. And that's also going to include like listener feedback and questions and things like that, which I'm really hoping I get more of this season. I always love being able to answer and address people's questions and comments. We're going to go through things like sleep education. I don't know what that looks like quite yet across the season, because right now I'm only doing one podcast episode a month, but we'll see. We're going to approach health in a way that is aware of our own nervous systems and our own psychology. I'm not a licensed mental health anything. I don't do psychology at all. But when it comes to behavioral psychology from a coaching aspect, it's really, really important to take that into consideration. And so the only thing I can do in this platform is to educate people on what may come up. And I try to cover as much as possible so that I can, put everything under an umbrella. But sometimes I miss stuff. We want to go with systems level thinking here. We want to start building systems into our lives, because that's where things become sustainable, is when it becomes habit, when it becomes part of your day-to-day life, when it becomes something that you recognize that you should not be living without because it is part of your system. That's the type of stuff that we want to focus on for 2026 in general, but I'm talking about business-wise for 2026. And then I also want to be compassionate to other people, but also not complacent. I don't want to be so compassionate that I ignore the fact that some people just need that push. And so there's a balance that I'm going to have to figure out for myself as well. But what we're working on is capacity building for the business. We're working on capacity building for people in general. I want to be a net positive to society, but we're also talking about things that are sustainable. And at the very, very least, we are talking about being human. There is a reason this business is called The Human Conditioned. Look up The Human Condition and then use your own thought process to get to how I got to where I am with the title of this business. The title, the name, I really want to say that like this is not, again, like I said, this isn't hustle culture. This isn't gimmicky. I'm not trying to be salesy. It means something to me. It matters to me. I have watched people burn out. I have burned out myself. In fact, if I'm being honest, I'm still at burnout point, but I'm working on it. I have spent a long time trying to push through what I've been going through, and that is not helpful at all. It's not beneficial. It's not going to help me make it, because you can't just muscle through things like this. My body needs to learn. But I also, I'm coming at this from both a personal aspect and from an educated aspect. And so I want to reiterate to people, as if I said it already, which I didn't, so you didn't miss anything. I want to say to people that the cost of ignoring your sleep, your recovery, your level of stress is tremendous. Oftentimes, we only ignore it until something breaks. It takes us having something break mentally, physically, for us to finally pay attention to what it was that we were doing. And what my goal is to help you get to a point where you're not waiting for something to break, where you recognize that you might be on the path to break something. And so we're trying to get off that path. And if you already broke something, it's possible to come back from it. So that's what we're trying to focus on. I just care about people. And that's really what it boils down to. So what we're going to say, in closing of this podcast episode is that this year, 2026, is not about fixing yourself. It's about supporting yourself in its entirety. You're trying to find what works for you personally. You're trying to find how to optimize your own health. You're recognizing that these are things that you need to pay attention to. And so like I said before, there's a lot of information that exists. So much information. Not all of it is right, and not everybody has the best intentions when they're giving it to you. So part of what this season is going to include is teaching people how. How do we learn these things without being inundated with people that are just trying to take advantage of us? So, hopefully that was a great introduction into the 2026 season 2 of the podcast, the Human Condition podcast, and my business. If any of this resonated with you, I would implore you to hang out with me this season and see how we're going to talk about real recovery and cover things like stress and sleep, things that are really relevant to every existing human being. I'm not sure how it's going to look for the rest of the season. I'm still trying to figure it out. But in the next episode, I think I want to focus on stress. Stress is not a mindset issue. It doesn't make you weak. It is a psychological and a societal issue that needs to be covered. So I'm going to try to unpack how chronic stress quietly shapes your behavior, has physiological impacts on health, and causes things like burnout, and why telling people to manage their own stress really ignores the human experience. So I don't know. We'll see. Next episode talking about stress. I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And I know that I think I already said that, but it's fine because I never know how to get off podcasts. So with that being said, until next time.